Today we're going to be modeling the left ear. And as you can see, I have a wedge of wax. The ear is formed wider at the top, more narrow at the bottom. And you can do that when you're making an ear. You want to go ahead and shape it the best that you can first. So ears are typically, especially the Canada Beauty, a question mark shape, so they're going to be wider at the top and more narrow at the bottom. So I've kind of got my shape ready to start molding the ear. I will give you a warning about doing the ear. Every time you create an indentation in the ear, you broaden and widen the wax, which may give you a much larger ear than you intended. So just be careful when you're making your depressions that you're not spreading the ear out too wide. Okay, so it's easier to get the slope of the ear created now as opposed to when you're trying to place it on the skull. So there are three major depressions with the ear. They are the concha, the triangular fossa, and the scapha. So we're going to start with the first depression, which is the concha. It's rather large and deep, and it is in the middle third of the ear. So I'm going to take my thumb, and I'm going to press on my wax. You can already see the ear starting to spread out. I'm going to make sure that this is my deepest and largest depression. Okay, so we have the concha. It's sloped where the meatus might be. So we're going to slope that. So I always angle my thumb a little bit so I get that sloping. Next depression is the triangular fossa. So I'm going to turn the ear. And I'm going to go ahead and do the triangular fossa. Now the triangular fossa is not as deep as the concha. So I'm going to use my index finger and I'm going to leave space for the anterior crus. So again, this depression is not going to be quite as deep as the concha, and I can see where I want my anterior crus to be. So I'm going to place my finger here, and I'm going to make another depression. Again, not as deep as the concha. And you can see here, right there, that's the beginning of the anterior crus. Okay, so that's my second depression. Now, keep in mind that the superior crus needs to be broader and flatter than the anterior crus. So for my scapha, I'm going to be very careful where I do that depression, because when I'm done, if I've done my three depressions correctly, the crus is what's left over. And the anterior crus is narrow, the superior crus is broad. So along the back surface, we want to define a depression, which is the shallowest of the three depression, and this is called the scapha. So I'm just going to use my finger. And I'm going to create that depression along the back of the ear. You can notice I'm also defining the posterior margin of the superior crus when I'm creating the scapha. Now I'm going to just take my spatula and slide this off. I can roll this over. I don't need all that wax. I can even define that superior crus even more. Just going to smooth it out a little bit. Okay, the next structure that I'm going to create is what's called an antitragus. And the antitragus is a small bump. It looks like this. It's resting on the anterior rim of the antihelix. So I'm going to place this back here more posteriorly. And smooth that in a little bit. So that is called the antitragus. Now, I want to make sure that my features look good. I have my depressions properly placed. I can see the crus of helix. And then the next thing I want to do is I want to take a thin piece of wax that I have rolled on my palm, just like this. And create it nice and thin all the way down. I don't think I'm going to use all this, but I'd like to have extra. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to place this. And it's going to look like it's growing out of the floor of the concha. So I'm going to place it inside and I'm going to put it on top. And wrap it around. Just like so. And then pinch off any excess I have into the lobe. So I just lay that over the top of the formed ear, ending at the inferior part of the floor of the concha. So I'm going to smooth that in and make that part of the lobe. Now this excess wax I have in the back, I can just take my spatula and slice that right off because I don't need all that extra wax. Especially when I go to place it, I don't want the ear protruding too far from the skull. So I'm just going to form it, take my fingers, smooth it out. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take an instrument and I want to press this cruciate helix down into the concha so it appears to be growing out of the floor of the concha. So I'm just going to take my instrument and lightly press on that. And I can also take my spatula and I can remove some of this excess wax as well. Just continue to taper. Placement of our created ear is extremely important, so we want to look at how to place this. So first of all, you want to look for your external auditory meatus. That's going to be key when you're placing your ear. Also, we're going to use top of the brow. And what we like to see in class is that you draw a straight line from the top of the brow in your wax. It should catch the top of the ear. Base of the nose straight back should catch the lobe, and the zygomatic arch should cut that ear in half. That's how you know if it's sized properly and it's placed properly. So what we're going to do is we're going to find that external auditory meatus. And then again, you're going to draw your lines to make sure that it catches the top of the ear and the base of the nose. And when I measured, it was a little bit too big. My ear was a little bit too big. So I lined it up with the top of the brow, and then I just pinched off a little bit of the lobe and tapered that. And then that way it fit. And then points of attachment, one feature that we're missing is called the tragus. We have the antitragus back here. And so we're going to use the tragus as a point of attachment. So that will help attach that ear to the cheek. And then you'll have your intertragic notch. That's why I have the antitragus posted back here more posteriorly. That's where I want that placed so that I have room for that intertragic notch.